Okay, this is the last story in the Read to Me Grandma series. It is Finding Nemo. Mentioning that, if you have any suggestions for a non-crime horror type book to read on Sundays, I was thinking I might do Prodigy 2 times a week, but I don't know how you guys feel about that, because I know that book doesn't do as well personally on my channel. But if there's a different non-horror type book that you guys wanted me to read, I have a couple in my dorm, not here, that I was thinking of. But yeah, let me know if you have any suggestions. But this, without further ado, is Finding Nemo. Near the edge of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, a clownfish named Nemo lived with his father, Marlin. Because Nemo was his only child, Marlin was very protective of him. One of Nemo's fins was smaller than the other, so Marlin always worried about Nemo's ability to swim. On Nemo's first day of school, Nemo and his classmates excitedly jumped on the back of their teacher, Mr. Ray. Mr. Ray was taking them on a trip to the drop-off, which was at the edge of the reef near the deep heart of the ocean. When Marlin learned of the plan, he worriedly swam after them. When he arrived at the drop-off, he saw Nemo's friends daring each other to swim out past the edge toward a boat anchored overhead. Marlin scolded Nemo, even though he had done nothing wrong. Marlin reminded Nemo that he couldn't swim very well. Nemo didn't like hearing that. While Marlin was busy talking with Nemo's teacher, Nemo, eager to demonstrate that he could swim as well as anyone despite his small fin, swam to the boat to prove his father wrong. Much to Nemo's horror, a scuba diver swam up and captured him. Nemo was taken aboard the boat while the others watched helplessly. Marlin tried to swim after the boat, but it quickly sped away. Marlin was frantic. "Has anyone seen a boat?" he asked all the fish swimming nearby. "They took my son." A regal blue tang fish named Dory offered to help. I forgot that Nemo swam after the boat because of his small fin. I don't know if that was as highlighted in the movie as it is. I have also not watched that movie in so long. "I saw a boat," she said. "Follow me." But Dory later admitted that she had a terrible memory. She couldn't remember anything for very long. In fact, she had even forgotten why Marlin was following her. Suddenly, a giant shark named Bruce appeared. Bruce took the two fish to a sunken submarine for a meeting with other sharks. The sharks, in their desire to improve their image, were determined not to eat fish anymore. They wanted to prove they could all get along and be friends. At the meeting, Marlin spotted a diver's mask. He realized it belonged to the diver who had captured Nemo. The mask had writing on it, but Marlin could not read it. As Dory grabbed the mask, it snapped and hit her in the nose. A drop of her blood floated right into Bruce's nose. The smell of Dory's blood sent Bruce into a frenzy. He could not control himself. He wanted fish for dinner. He chased after Marlin and Dory, hungrily snapping his jaws. The other sharks tried to stop him without success. Marlin and Dory had to think fast. They raced into the submarine's torpedo launcher. Dory launched a torpedo right into Bruce's mouth. Bruce angrily spit the torpedo out of his mouth without realizing that it was headed for an underwater floating mine. The torpedo hit the mine and exploded. Luckily, when the dust settled from the blast, Marlin and Dory still had the mask, the only clue to Finding Nemo. It's weird when a movie that was this movie was a big part of my childhood, is like broken down into little sections that are just so much, like, the story is so basic now. Kerplunk, a frightened Nemo was dropped into a fish tank. The scuba diver, a dentist named Dr. Sherman, had taken Nemo to his office. Nigel, a pelican, swooped by to say hello to all of his fish friends in the tank. When the dentist shooed the bird away, he accidentally knocked over a photo of a little girl named Darla. Nemo soon learned that Darla was Dr. Sherman's niece, and he, Nemo, was going to be her birthday present. To make matters worse, Darla did not know how to care for fish. Just then, a fish named Gil swam over to introduce himself. Gil was the leader of the tank. Like Nemo, he too had a damaged fin. The two fish became fast friends. Gil eagerly explained that he had an escape plan. Meanwhile, Dory and Marlin had to devise their own escape plan. Dory had dropped the diver's mask into a deep trench. Swimming down to retrieve it, the two fish encountered a fierce anglerfish with a glowing antenna. Marlin tried to keep the light nearby without getting eaten, while Dory read the writing on the mask. there's there's Marlin trying his best to not get eaten. And there's the tank with all the fish. The pictures in this book are really pretty. I like the color use in the Nemo chapter. Marlin and Dory had the address of the scuba diver, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. Now they had to figure out how to get there. They stopped to ask a school of moonfish for directions to Sydney. The moonfish gave directions to Dory, along with some advice. When you get to the trench, swim through it, not over it, the moonfish warned her. But by the time they reached the trench, Dory had forgotten. Unfortunately, Marlin tricked Dory into swimming over the trench. They were soon surrounded by hundreds of dangerous pink jellyfish. The jellyfish had poisonous tentacles that stung. Marlin nervously watched Dory bounce on a jellyfish top, suggested they play a game. Whoever can hop the fastest on the tops of these jellyfish wins, he said. This way the tentacles could not sting them. They had almost escaped when Dory was stung. Marlin bravely pulled her out of the jellyfish forest, but he was also stung. Weak and tired, the two fish passed out. Back in the tank, Gale was preparing Nemo for the great escape. He explained how he tried to escape once before by jumping into the toilet. All drains lead to the ocean, kid, he told Nemo. Now Gale had another plan. They would break the filter in the fish tank. With the filter broken, the tank was likely to get dirty. While it was being cleaned, the fish would be placed in plastic bags. Then they could bounce out the window and into the harbor. Gale is a very smart fish. Nemo's job was to swim into the filter and wedge a pebble in the fan. The fish cheered when Nemo succeeded. The fan stopped, but as Nemo made his way back, the pebble came loose. The plan failed. How could Nemo escape now? Meanwhile, a group of sea turtles rescued the weary Marlin and Dory. Crush, a surfer turtle, befriended them. He offered to let the fish ride with him on a current to Sydney. Marlin and Dory gladly accepted. Marlin told the other turtles about his quest to find a son. The turtles in turn told other sea creatures. Soon, Marlin's story had spread throughout the vast ocean. Nigel the pelican overheard the news. He quickly flew to the dentist's office to tell Nemo. Nemo was inspired by his father's courage. He raced back into the filter. This time, Nemo succeeded in jamming a pebble squarely in the fan. Sure enough, with the filter not working, the tank started to get dirty. There were 2 days left until Darla arrived, so the fish hoped the tank would soon require cleaning. This is just a story about a father's love. A very beautiful story about a father's love. Crush and the sea turtles bid farewell to Marlin and Dory. The two fish had almost reached Sydney. They swam and swam, but soon realized they were lost. When a giant blue whale approached, Dory asked for directions. Unexpectedly, the little fish were sucked into the whale's gigantic mouth. Back at the dentist's office, Dr. Sherman noticed his fish tank was slimy and green. "I'd better clean the tank before Darla gets here," he said. The escape plan was working, but by the next morning the tank was perfectly clean. Dr. Sherman had purchased a new high-tech filter called the Aquascrum 2003. Now he would never have to clean the tank again. Sadly, the fish realized their escape plan had failed. Swoosh! Outside Sydney Harbor, a blue whale surfaced and spouted. Dory and Marlin rode atop the spray. Marlin was excited to see many boats. He and Dory searched all night for the boat that took Nemo. Then a pelican swooped by and scooped them up. Marlin was determined not to be eaten and lodged himself in the bird's throat. As the pelican choked on the two fish, Nigel swam by and stopped to help his friend. He whacked the bird on the back and the two fish landed on the dock. "I've got to find my son Nemo," Marlin exclaimed. Nigel realized that this fish was Nemo's father. Nigel snatched the two fish before a flock of hungry seagulls could get to them. They headed towards Dr. Sherman's office to rescue Nemo. I do not remember them getting swallowed by a whale. Apparently, I need to rewatch Finding Nemo, because I do not remember any of this movie. Back in Dr. Sherman's office, the dentist scooped Nemo from the tank and put him in a clear plastic bag. Darla was on her way. Nemo had an idea. When Darla walked in, Nemo played dead. He hoped he would be flushed down the drain. Instead, Dr. Sherman headed for the trash can. Meanwhile, Nigel flew in through the window and startled Dr. Sherman, who dropped the bag. In a heroic effort to save his pal, Gale leaped out of the tank and launched Nemo into the spit tank. Nemo escaped down the drain. Nigel dropped Marlin and Dory back into the sea. Marlin had been had seen Nemo floating in the bag and thought he was gone. Wanting to be alone, he left Dory. But Nemo, who was now safely back in the ocean, ran into Dory. Dory was delighted at being able to reunite Nemo and his father. A few weeks later, Marlin and Nemo raced to the schoolyard. Marlin proudly watched his son go off on an adventure with his class. Suddenly, Nemo turned back to give his dad a hug. "Love you, Dad," said Nemo. "I love you too, son," said Marlin. Fatherly love. So beautiful.